How's it going, everyone? James Lynch here doing another quick preview of Contender Series. This time we're talking about week 2, which goes down tomorrow night at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas. And just want to thank everyone off the top for checking out last week's preview. I wasn't sure if I was going to do these each week, but the feedback was great. The views were good. So just want to thank everyone who tuned into last week's preview. And if you're new here, thanks for checking out this second preview I'm going to be doing. This is going to be a quick preview, nothing too in-depth, but I will go through all the stats of each fighter and give you my picks for Tuesday night's card, which, like I said, goes down at the UFC Apex tomorrow night in Las Vegas. Let's start first in the middleweight division. We've got a returning Contender Series fighter, Anthony Adams, taking on Imba Congonani at middleweight. Really exciting fight here. Let's start first with Anthony Adams, 8-1 record, 32 years old, 6'1" with a 75-inch reach. So he's going to have a 2-inch height and 3.5-inch reach advantage over Imba in this fight. He's from Elevation Fight Team, so coming out of a really good camp. He hasn't fought since January 2019 when he got a finish over Josh Cavan at LFA 57. So a bit of a layoff, a long layoff, I should say, coming into this fight. He lost on the Contender Series in July of 2018, if you guys remember. Lost that fight by decision. That was a short notice fight, but still not a great showing in that one. He was undefeated prior to that loss. So like I mentioned, he's coming into this one with an 8-1 record. And the one thing I like about Anthony Adams in this fight is that he's never been finished. So I should mention we don't have odds yet out for this fight, but I do imagine Adams would be a slight favorite just because of his experience, but you never know because they might go with the younger guy here. Let's talk about Imba Congonani. He is 6-0, undefeated, 26 years old, 5'11" with a 73-inch reach. So like I mentioned, Adams older, but does have a height and reach advantage in this fight. He hasn't fought like Anthony Adams since August of 2019, so he's fought a bit more recently. But he's only fought 3 opponents with winning records in 6 career fights, so that's a little bit concerning in this one. Another case, like I mentioned last week, where you might have a guy who's fighting, a little bit too easy of competition. And with Anthony Adams, I mean, he's getting to train with a who's who at Elevation Fight Team like Justin Gaethje and just some really high-level fighters there. So that is one thing to sort of consider looking into this fight here. With that said, I'm kind of leaning towards Anthony Adams in this fight. He is a guy that, finds a way to win. I mean, that's sort of what we've seen from his last couple of performances, especially in LFA, where he can, go out there and take care of business. I think him fighting at middleweight is a better weight class for him than welterweight. He's a pretty solid talent. I know Thomas Denny, who's one of his longtime coaches, the UFC vet, is very high on him. Actually, Denny isn't a UFC vet, Elite XC vet, the guy who fought Nick Diaz. That's whose coaches Thomas Denny. He's been very high on Anthony Adams for quite some time. I think this might be the fight he puts it together. Personally, just from my perspective, I don't have an amazing read on this fight. I think Imba could be a factor in this fight as well, but I'll pick Anthony Adams just because I think he's fought a little bit better competition, and I think he's a little bit more seasoned and has some advantages, like I mentioned, in this fight. But personally, I would stay away from this one. Too many question marks on both guys heading into the opening fight of the night. Okay, now here's a fight I do have a good read on. This, to me, might be the fight of the season. I cannot wait for this fight. If you guys have watched me do interviews over the last couple of years, you guys know how high I've been on this next fighter. And of course, I'm talking about TJ Laramie, who I think is the best prospect in Canada. I've been saying that for years. This guy's quite the talent, but he's got a tough fight here. He's taking on Daniel Swain, and this is going to be at featherweight. Now, this to me is a UFC level fight. I mean, you have a guy in Daniel Swain who's got just a ton of fights. He's got 30 career fights, and he's fighting a guy in TJ Laramie who's only got 14 fights, but he still fought really stiff competitions. So let's start first with TJ Laramie, 22 years old. Gotta like that. Really young fighter, 5'7". They don't have his reach listed, but I know his reach is pretty decent. He's got 8 wins by stoppage. He's coming off a decision win over Andrew Cruz at PFC 12 in December. He holds a unanimous decision win over Charles Jourdain at TKO 41. Now, that was a title fight. That was a 5-round fight. I was actually there for that one. That was at the Bell Center in Montreal back in 2017, like I mentioned, and Laramie just dominated the fight. Charles Jourdain, I don't think won a single round in that fight. Laramie basically just out-wrestled him for the entire fight. So you guys can, I'm pretty sure that fight's on Fight Pass. You guys can go look that up, but a really good performance from Laramie, especially over a guy in Jourdain who now we see is really making some waves in the UFC despite coming off a loss in his last fight. But Jourdain, obviously quite the talent. So keep that in mind as well too for TJ Laramie as far as having that win there. He also has a pretty good win over another guy named João Luis Nogueira, who was 25-6 at the time. Laramie actually finished him in that fight. And if you watch my interview with Laramie here on the channel, he talks about how, that was the biggest win of his career in his opinion, just because of the experience of who he fought. So Laramie's got that championship experience being a title holder in TKO. As far as his losses, all of them are kind of weird. So the first loss he had in his career was to Vince Murdoch. That name sounds familiar. I think he's still in the UFC roster, but obviously Vince has had some health issues, so he's been out of the cage. But Vince, obviously, UFC caliber fighter. Laramie lost that fight, but that's a fight where, ask most people, including people on Vince Murdoch's team, they felt like Laramie won the fight. It was kind of a hometown decision. Laramie went to Michigan to take that fight. Murdoch's from Michigan, so we can erase that one as far as most people think that's a win. Now, the 2 losses he's had are the same way. He lost to Alex Morgan, who's a guy that Jourdain beat on TKO, but is a guy that has 2 wins over TJ Laramie. Alex Morgan, an up-and-comer as well out of Canada, knocked out TJ Laramie twice in the first round. So I don't know what happened in those fights. I don't know if it was a bad style matchup or Laramie got a little bit too excited. The first one was a bit controversial in terms of the ref stoppage, but the second one clearly was a knockout there. Laramie, for whatever reason, had some trouble with Alex Morgan. He got knocked out twice, so that is a bit concerning just looking at that, even though he is 22 and even though he's got some good wins as well, that he has been knocked out before twice. So that's something to keep in mind. But Laramie, pulling out all the stops for this camp. I know he's been in Las Vegas for a good chunk of this camp, training at Extreme Couture. He brought out his boxing coach, Kara Rowe, to help him with his striking, and he's getting to work with guys like, Cody Stamen. He's actually training with Vince Murdoch now, too, which is great. He just trained with Justin James leading into his fight with Gavin Tucker. So Laramie getting a lot of really good looks. He also spent some time in my neck of the woods in Vancouver, training with, just a little bit of a training camp here when he was on vacation, training with guys like Tristan Connolly and Cole Smith and, some of the really good fighters here at the gyms here in Canada as well. So Laramie's getting some awesome training heading into this one. And I think, honestly, this is a guy that should have been signed to the UFC. I don't even think he should have gone the Contender Series route. Like I said, this is a UFC level fight, but Laramie, I'm very high on him, and I'm very high on him in this fight as well, too. But let's talk about Daniel Swain, because he's a tough opponent here. Swain has a 29-1 record. He's 29 years old. He's 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. So, he's got a little bit of a reach advantage and a height advantage over Laramie, although I'm not sure exactly what the reach is on Laramie, but he's got 17 wins by stoppage. Now, Daniel Swain is a guy that is, the definition of a journeyman regional fighter, and I mean that in a good way. He's fought a lot of solid competition. He's fought overseas, fought in M1. So, going into the Contender Series is not going to be a big deal for him because he's been under the bright lights before fighting for M1. But I will mention that his last win was over a guy who's 4-10 in M1 Challenge, and that fight was in August of 2019. So Laramie been a little bit more active. Swain missed, I think, all of 2018 due to an injury. So Laramie's fought a lot more over the last couple of years as well. He's got some notable wins. He has a win actually over Sam Sicilia in his 3rd pro fight as a UFC vet. And then as far as notable losses, he lost to Julian Arosa in King of the Cage by doctor stoppage. So that was an interesting loss there as well. I've interviewed both guys. Get your assessment on that as far as the training camps for both fighters. Swain's actually got a bit of Canada connections as well too, because he used to live in Vancouver a couple years ago. He actually went to Simon Fraser University here, so he lives close by in Washington State. But thought that was kind of interesting. This is kind of like a Canadian fight here. But as far as the pick goes, I feel pretty confident Laramie's going to get this done for a couple of reasons. First off, Daniel Swain's last TKO win was way back in August of 2015, and Swain mainly wins his fights by submission or by decision. His last, like I said, in terms of his stoppage wins, his last TKO win was August 2015. And as far as submitting, like I mentioned, he submits a lot of his opponents. Laramie actually has never been submitted in his career. So that gives me more reason to think that Laramie can go out there and take care of business. The other thing is Swain in the interview said that Laramie has high school level wrestling. I disagree with that. I mean, he absolutely out wrestled Charles Jourdain in that TKO fight, like I mentioned. So I'm very high on Laramie in this fight. I think he gets it done, but I think this is going to be a tough fight for him. Like I said, fighting a guy a lot more experienced, but Laramie's been in there with some of the best on the regional scene. I think Laramie's going to knock out Daniel Swain in the 2nd round. I'm going to go with that. And I think Laramie will get a contract. I've been asked this for months, which Canadian do you think has the best chance of making it to the UFC? To me, it's TJ Laramie. Unless he does something crazy and makes a mistake, I see this as his fight to lose, and I'm very high on him, and I think he's going to be the next big star from Canada. Not GSP level, but he is a guy that has already captivated an audience. He's a great follow on social media. If you guys remember, he actually had a viral video a couple of years ago with his ex-girlfriend cheating on him that I don't know if you guys can find that, but he's already got a lot of like people know who he is, and you just can't say enough good things about Laramie. Ask any of his teammates, Cody Stamen, ask any Kyle Preplik, who's in the UFC, ask any of them. This kid is super talented. And guess what? He's actually got a brother too, Tony Laramie, who fights at flyweight, who's equally as talented as well too. And I'm sure a name we'll be hearing about soon. But I like TJ Laramie here. I think he gets it done. I think he gets the UFC contract. And if you guys are looking to bet this fight, I would bet TJ Laramie. That's how high I am on this kid. I'm not biased. Like I said, I've interviewed both fighters and I've known about Swain for a while, but I just feel very strongly about the talent level of TJ Laramie. And I think this kid's the real deal. So TJ Laramie is my pick by stoppage. All right, let's continue on here. We've got a women's strawweight fight between Vanessa Demopolis taking on Corey McKenna. Demopolis, 5-1, 31 years old, 5'1" with a 62-inch reach. Now, she just won the LFA title on July 17th. You guys can actually watch that fight on UFC Fight Pass, and it's an interesting fight because Demopolis was actually losing that fight before she ended up coming back and winning by submission. So, really big win there for Demopolis. She's only got one loss, and it's not a bad loss, actually. She lost to Itzel Esquivel, who you guys know has fought in Invicta recently, who's just quite the talent herself. So, not a bad loss to have on the resume. in. Demopolis trains at a great camp. She's at Black House MMA, so she's getting to work with, Vince the Anomaly, who we saw in the UFC a few weeks ago, who ended up losing to Jamal Emmers, but still getting good training there. She gets to train with Chito Vera. Like, she left Ohio where she, grew up and lived and everything, and she's, been training at Black House for the last couple of years, and I don't think it's any coincidence the winning streak she's gone on since she's made that move to California. So really impressed with Demopolis as far as some of the moves she's made. She's also an exotic dancer. She's left that behind. You guys can watch my interview. It's here on the channel under the Contender Series playlist, but she talks all about that and some of the moves she's made, and I think she looks great in this fight. Now she's taking on Corey McKenna. A lot of hype behind McKenna, who comes over to us from Cage Warriors. She's younger. She's 21 years old. She's 5'3". We don't have the reach listed here, but all of her fights have been in Cage Warriors. The record of her opponents is pretty solid, 14-3. It hasn't fought since May of 2019. So Demopolis a little bit more active, but McKenna, like I said, fought some really stiff competition. This is a tough one for me, honestly, because I didn't think Demopolis looked great leading up to that finish until she got the finish in her last fight. But she has fought recently, and she does fight at a good camp. I think I'm going to give a slight edge to Vanessa Demopolis. Again, we don't have odds out at the time, but it's not confident. I would personally stay away from this one. From what I've seen of McKenna, she looks pretty solid herself. I think this is going to be a pretty close fight. I don't think we'll see a finish in this fight. I think it does go the distance, but I think Demopolis will get the win, and I don't know if she'll get the contract. She has an entertaining fight style, but I don't know if it'll be enough to get the contract, so that's just sort of my thoughts on that fight. This is another awesome fight in the men's bantamweight division. We've got Adrian Yanez taking on Brady Hung, and Yanez is 10-3. He's 26 years old, 5'7" with a 70.5-inch reach. So he's a little bit shorter than Brady Hung, but I think he's fought way more quality opponent. Yanez is coming over a split decision win over Kyle Estrada at LFA 78 in November, which is a quality win. Kyle Estrada, pretty solid prospect himself. His last loss, Adrian Yanez, was to Miles Johns, who you guys know was a UFC bantamweight. That was a split decision loss, and that's a fight that really could have gone either way. So Yanez, and you'll notice this with a lot of the LFA fighters, they fought just nothing but solid competition on the regional scene. So Yanez is definitely ready for this opportunity, and with a 10-3 record, absolutely ready for this opportunity. He's finished 2 of his last 3 opponents, and just overall, I think he's really been turning a corner in his career, and I think this is the right moment for him to have this Contender Series fight. Now, Brady Hung, 11-1 record, 27 years old, 5'9". He last fought February in Pancrase, won a decision over a guy who was 15-7-1, so not a bad opponent there. But he lost to Martin Day in 2018. The UFC fighter ended up losing by TKO in that one. So it kind of shows that, when you get that step up in competition, he ends up getting finished. At least that's what it looked like in that fight. Whereas Yanez, he lost a split to Miles Johns in a fight that could have gone either way. So the one thing that's concerning, and I told you this is going to be a theme probably when I do all these previews, is that Brady Hung, 4 out of his 12 opponents have winning records. So hasn't fought the level of competition. And Yanez pointed that out in the interview I did with him, which is here on this channel. He just talked about how he doesn't think that Brady Hung has fought anyone on his level yet. I agree with that one. I'm going Adrian Yanez in this fight by TKO in the second round. I think he gets it done and really impresses Dana White and potentially gets a contract here, because I do think he's ready for this opportunity. And I think if he fights his fight, he's going to end up winning this one despite having a little bit of a height and reach disadvantage in this one. So the pick is going to be Adrian Yanez. And in the main event, we got an awesome fight in the middleweight division. Joseph Pyfer taking on Dustin Stolfus. Pfeiffer, 7-1, 23 years old, 6'1". He defeated Chase Gamble in his last fight by second round TKO in February at Ring of Combat 71. This is a Ring of Combat guy, and you guys know that in general, Ring of Combat, pretty solid promotion for turning out some really good UFC fighters. So just keep that in mind. He's only got, he's only had 1 loss in his career, and that was by submission at Ring of Combat 70 in November. So he's finished 6 of his last 8 opponents. So that's obviously why they put this in the main event. These guys definitely finish their fights. Stolfus, I should say, 12-1, 28 years old, 5'11". So he's a little bit shorter than Pfeiffer, who's 6'1". They didn't have the reach listed for either guy. He's coming into this one with a lot of momentum. 9-fight win streak. He's fought mainly overseas. He fought for, I'm trying to remember, it was like We Love MMA and a few of the other promotions over there, but I think he's originally from Pennsylvania. So he's coming into this one with a lot of momentum, finished his last 4 opponents. I would imagine Stolfus is going to be the favorite heading into this fight just because he's got a better record. And, he's, like I said, he's fought, a little bit more in terms of competition here. This one's a tough one. Another one I don't have a great read on. I'm going to give the slight edge to Stolfus in this fight. I think he probably goes out there and wins the decision. That's sort of just the safe pick on my end. I haven't seen a ton of footage on either guy, to be completely honest, but just Stolfus, just from what I've seen with the limited footage I have seen and just sort of his record and everything else, I have a feeling he'll edge this one out, but I expect this to be a good fight. The UFC wouldn't put this as the main event if they didn't think it was going to be, fireworks, so expect a solid outing, but with Stolfus going out there and getting the win there. So I want to know what you guys think of these picks below. Who are you picking picking for Contender Series? Who do you think has value? Are you guys as high on TJ Laramie as I am? I don't know if you guys have watched footage of him, but I'm very high on him. I think he's going to do an awesome job for this fight. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports, and make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports, and enjoy tomorrow night's fights.